Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of BIM After Dark Live. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Jeff. If you haven't been here before, thanks for joining for the first time. If you've been here before, thanks for coming back. This is actually a weekly live show that I've been doing on YouTube this is actually episode 21 of the official BIM After Dark Live. And basically every week, whether it's myself or I bring some guests on, we geek out about Revit and BIM and related software. And I know we're going to have a ton of content today, so I'm just going to jump right into it and introduce our guest, who is going to probably be a regular on the show, because you've already been on, I think, 2 or 3 times now, Aaron, including a couple times before it was officially BIM After Dark Live. So Aaron Mahler's joining me today. We're going to be talking about filters in Revit. If you guys didn't see Aaron's video, I'll post a link to it in the description. But the last live session we did together, Aaron talked about templates. And part of the discussion, filters and templates kind of go hand in hand, but I'm sure we're going to get all over filters today, more than just templates. But during that discussion, we said maybe it was a good idea to do this. I got a few questions about filters in previous sessions and in emails. So thankfully, Aaron, thanks for joining us. I wasn't sure when
Thanks for having me.
I wasn't sure when a good time was going to be, because if you guys don't know, Aaron is now a father of 2,
Yes.
fairly recently. So I was giving him a few weeks before I started bothering him about coming back on the show. So thanks for coming on, Aaron. And maybe for those of you who don't know who you are, maybe give a little introduction about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Aaron Maller. My background is in architecture. I went to architecture school up in New York, graduated in '05, started using Revit in '06. Between '05 and '06, used like every other BIM platform out there. I traversed through Vectorworks, ArchiCAD, Digital Project, AutoCAD Architecture, because the economy in New York is bad. So you just keep job hopping upstate New York. But since using Revit in '06, did architecture for a large number of years. Got into BIM management, where I met folks like Jeff, of course, and was doing that for a design build company up until 2015, when I started Parallax Team. And now there is a small group of us that work together basically as BIM consultants for architects, engineers, contractors, owners, doing everything we can, and we're very vague just because we like to do anything we can to basically enhance BIM for the whole industry. All kinds of different stakeholders. So building templates, building libraries, building models for projects, actually, yeah, you name it. We build apps, do a lot of Dynamo, and John's doing some crazy stuff. John Pearson, who works with us, does some crazy stuff lately between both Dynamo and generative design. So yeah, we're doing all kinds of crazy stuff these days.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam, for joining us. And again, I guess we'll probably reach back at the end, but probably the best way to contact you, Aaron, would be on Twitter, I would assume.
Twitter, email, generally is the easiest, just because it comes directly to my phone. Twitter, yeah, if it's a short conversation, definitely Twitter.
Do you have Twitter notifications turned off or not on your phone?
No, so you know what's funny? I get all of my notifications. Just recently, a couple of months ago, my phone is just entirely on silent now, so nothing actually comes through unless I check my phone. And I didn't realize, I guess that might be like a generational thing. Like until a few months ago, I had my phone always on, and it was starting to create some serious anxiety. And somebody was finally like, "You keep your ringer on," and I was like, "That's a thing. You can just turn it off."
Yeah.
But like, no joke, phone calls are the worst. And it's like, I leave my phone number on all of my business contacts because I want the whole industry to be able to get a hold of me. But I didn't realize that once you're listed as like a vendor for conferences and stuff, like 80 phone calls a week that are just junk. And I'm like,
Are you sure you don't want to try their software though? Are you sure?
Yeah. Are you sure you don't want this list of solid CAD users? Like, you want, do people really buy those?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I've never bought them, I could tell you that, but I know exactly where you're coming from. Yeah, I actually started recently turning off, I turned off all my email notifications, and so I only go on and refresh to check email, which has been really helpful, because I have like 10 accounts on there. And then I also turned off Twitter notifications. So it is. I mean, I have to say it is nice, because, like you said, eventually it's just ding 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 all day long. So I definitely suggest it if you haven't tried it yet. But I know you're very active on Twitter, so that's why I mentioned.
I love Twitter. Like, Twitter notifications are my favorite, actually, just because the whole industry is having, I think, really good conversations there for the most part. So those are the ones I actually enjoy getting, unless it's like the random tag at 3 a.m. Somebody's like throwing Autodesk under the bus and they tag you, and I'm like, why? I don't understand why that happens.
Aaron needs to be part of this conversation.
I'm like, no, please don't. And then I like have to just go tell the Autodesk folks like, hey, I don't know this person. I don't know why they tagged me.
Oh man.
Hmm.
So thanks again for joining, and for everyone that's here live, thank you for joining live. So we didn't really have much of a format because I know Aaron can talk for hours on hours with filters, so I know we're going to roll into this and it's going to be a great conversation. But just to remind everyone who's watching this live, I'll be checking the chat. So if you have questions, if you wanna us to dive in deeper on something that Aaron mentioned, just shoot it in the chat and we'll go through it. I mean, one of the great things about this setup is that it's live. I guess one of the other things that's not great about it is there is a crazy thunderstorm going on outside right now. So if for some reason the screen just goes black, it's probably because I lost power and internet, or both. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Cross our fingers. But if it does, I promise you we will just reschedule. All right. So I mean, without further ado, I'm sure Aaron, you've got somewhere you want to start, unless you want me to start prying a little bit, or just jump into some content.
Oh, I feel like maybe we should. Well, we could just jump in too.
I mean, maybe we should start because there may be some people who one of the things I find when it comes to filtering in Revit, when view filters especially, is that a lot of people don't even know it exists, and then people who find out where it is on the tabs, they still don't
Totally,
really
totally.
know what it is. So maybe we should start pretty basic and maybe do like a filtering
Yeah.
101. How about
We
that?
can
Let's
we
do
we
that.
can we can totally do that. And I just happened to peek over at the chat when you said that. And I just have to shout out like mad respect to the folks who are watching at 2:40 in the morning in East
I
Africa.
know.
That's amazing.
I mean,
Uh,
I would not stay up for this at
oh,
2:40. So
I'm
thank you
just
guys.
so impressive. So kind of an interesting thing that you brought that up. Let me just say really quickly. So, we do like, our template that we have for our company, we make versions of it. We make spin-offs of it for clients that we sell to them. And then because they have an entirely new environment they've never seen, we used to fly to their office and do a 40-hour training session. Like it's Monday to Friday, it's the whole week. We can't do that now, right? So what's interesting now is when I share my screen in a couple minutes, I can actually show you the whole playlist, if you will. We've converted the entire 40 hours into videos. Now, here's why I bring it up. Only a few of those videos pertain to what we're doing today, like talking about filters,
Mhm.
but the whole like how to create a filter and what filters do we have and why. Maybe we'll pop up one or two of those videos just as like because they're all hosted already, so we could pop up a link to a couple of them, not the
Yeah.
whole 40 hours of course, but it'd be kind of a cool thing for people to pick through for filters.
Yeah, for
So
sure, for
so we'll
sure.
have to do that.
I agree. That's awesome, man.
So let's see, let me just pop up, let me see, hit
Yeah, we might
this.
as well. Like I said, I one of the things I think people are so interested in is not just to see the advanced side of how you're using filters, but I do think that there's a certain level of complete misunderstanding of what filters even are, and so.
Sure, sure. Let me just make sure you have the right Revit on the screen this time. Cool. Okay.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, I mean, so in our template, one of the things, so filters are interesting. I forget exactly which version they came out in. I want to say it was 9 or 9.1 or 2008, right around there. And before filters, there were, there were a lot of different ways people were handling visibility of different elements in different views. And so if I just look at our template holistically, there's like a large number of different types of drawings that either architects or engineers want to do. So my focus being architecture, let's say there's like floor plans versus furniture plans versus equipment plans versus floor pattern plans versus acoustical plans. All these things need to show different stuff, and stuff is not a technical term, of course. But basically, how I like to describe it to all of our clients is, take a plan and then verbally tell me what needs to be different on that plan versus another plan in your set of drawings. And so, if we go back to, and actually the best sheet to open up, I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but we'll
That's all
go to
right.
our sheet. This is a sheet that basically houses all of our legends. So while a lot of folks like to put legends on the individual drawings, I like to have it all on one sheet, because now we're basically saying this is why all of the plans look different. Right. And so here's a great example is when we look at a finish plan or like a furnishing plan, we want the furniture itself to kind of pop. We want it to read as like pochade or dark line weights, because we want that item to jump out and say, I am what's relevant in this drawing. But that same piece of equipment, this same lateral file drawer or whatever, we might want to also show in like an equipment plan or something, but in the equipment plan, we don't want it to pop. We want it to be like a light gray because it's not the focus of the drawing. The equipment is now the focus of the drawing.
Mm-hmm.
So the filters, the way I like to describe them is they are basically graphical controls very similar to visibility graphics, the model tab with subcategories, except instead of acting on categories and subcategories, you get to use model data to decide what items are affected. So if we were to jump in, just as a quick example, this is what we call a finish plan. So it's showing like the floor patterns and whatnot, but mainly it's here to show where the FF&E items are, the corner guards, the wall protection, and some things like office storage. So if we go look at filters, and what's kind of interesting about our template and the way we use filters is this is a long list. This list of filters exists in every single view template that's in the project. So there's two things going on here. One, let's leverage the power of filters because what Revit gave us in filters is amazing. But two, let's also leverage repetition because a user who uses this template every day will come to recognize the filter include FFE does this thing we're about to talk about, and they will then know that's the way they do it forever. They won't have to like, oh, I need to come up with a convention for how to shade my office equipment. Like you don't need to reinvent the wheel. They use the same one in every single drawing.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, let's actually jump into the filter dialog and we'll just do a quick little how-to. So if we jump into edit new, it opens the filter dialog. It is worth mentioning, by the way, that just in this dialog that you're looking at right here, I'm in Revit 2020. There is a really cool new column in Revit 2021. So we can look at that in a minute. I just didn't happen to have that one opened selfishly before we jumped on the call. It's open on the other screen now, so we can get over there in a second.
Anticipation,
So
I like it. Make people stick around.
So this is our filter dialog, right? And here what you're looking at is all of the different filters that we have in the Parallax template. And there's a lot of them. I haven't counted them, but include FF&E to show you an example of what it does is first you say, these are all the categories that you can check with a filter. So you'll see we're looking at casework families, curtain panels, mullions, furniture families, lighting devices, generic models, light fixtures, nurse call devices, planting, plumbing fixtures, railings, and so on. So a whole bunch of categories. And what we're doing is we're checking all of those categories for this particular parameter called include me in FF&E. And is that value equal to yes? Now I'll give you a hint about how we're deciding if that parameter is a yes or a no. Do I want this item included in my FF&E package, right? It's really basic. I say that kind of snotty like, but it's pretty basic because that's what I think people are missing is once we got filters in Revit, we got the capacity to segregate our items in the model by data exactly the way we want to segregate them in drawings.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look here, basically everywhere we have what we call an include parameter, they're basically schedules that we create in our architectural drawings. So we have include me in appliances, include me in equipment, include me in FF&E or furnishings or restroom accessories, because for some odd reason in architecture, we give those their own schedule. I don't really know why, but it's okay. And include me in site. So these are all different things that were pre-filtered. And this is a pretty basic filter. Like you'll notice here that all we're doing is we're saying all categories include FF&Es equal to yes. We got some new functionality in 20, was it 19, 18? I don't remember. So essentially it's really great because now it's still not quite as cool as the search set in Navisworks, but it's getting there because now you can make a new filter and say, I want to search casework and doors in this new filter. But what we were doing with the include is we were saying, let's check for, something like include in appliances is set to yes. But what's really neat that you can do in the last couple of releases of Revit is you can actually switch this to an or. And that means that now instead of saying the same condition has to be true for casework and doors, I can now say search just the casework and tell me if basically include in FF&E is equal to yes, or find me doors where include me in appliance, and you would never have a door included in appliances, but just go with it here. So what's great is in previous versions of Revit, this had to be two filters. Mm-hmm. And now we can do it as one filter, which is freaking phenomenal. We have not updated our full template to reflect all of those potential possibilities yet, because we
Mhm.
still edit the template in 18, which actually I think it's there in 18, but
Yeah, I
that's
want to say
neither here nor
18.
there.
18 sounds right, but it could be
Yeah,
19. I
sounds
don't
right.
know.
Sounds right. So all that to say, this is super powerful, because then what happens is, let's say now I'm not going to use that goofy new filter I just made because these are already in here, but now we get to make graphical changes to the items that are selected in that filter. So if we look here, we've basically said, if I'm included in FF&E, I want to be post shade gray. If I come in here and say, maybe if instead of gray, you also want to like change the lines to be, like a dark red, you can do that as well. And what's really powerful to me about this, and I know we have an audience from, all around the world tonight, but what's kind of interesting is no matter which classification system you use, Revit categories don't really get you to the
Mm,
finish line with any classification system.
mhm,
And that's not a disservice to Revit. That's just that they've been hard coded since day one, and it is what it is.
mhm.
So what I like about it is I don't really care what categories people use anymore.
Right.
Um, a lot of you may know, if you've looked or read anything I've written on Twitter, is that a lot of our families end up being generic models, um, simply because cutability is hard coded into family templates. So, like if you make a family out of specialty equipment, it's automatically not able to be cut by a view, and sometimes based on the sheer size of a component, like physically,
Mhm,
you'll want it to be cut by a view. Like an X-ray machine is a great example. If a building section cuts through an X-ray machine, I don't want to see the X-ray machine all the way from the front, because it's the whole room, and that makes
mhm.
the building section look weird.
Right.
So it's got to be a generic model.
Mhm,
So what's great about filters is now we don't have to worry about, whether or not this thing is furniture or furniture system or specialty equipment. I say FF&E items, whatever you want to model it as is cool. And then I'm just going to check this box that's inside the type properties of the object called include me in FF&E.
right.
So, real quick about filters, this is just kind of a little tip for anybody who's watching, is you'll notice here that, like, if I were to actually edit this family, it is definitely fair to say that we actually load the parameters into the content. Um, the benefit that that gets you is you can pre-populate it in the library, right? So include FF&E is automatically checked for the filing cabinet. So forever, whenever somebody loads it into a Parallax project, it's already classified as FF&E. But it's not necessary to edit every one of your families to get that to happen, because that same parameter is also loaded in the template as a project parameter. And
Mhm,
so I think we did the same exact demo when we were doing the talk on templates. But if we were to jump in here and just find like a completely goofy family from some manufacturer, and I always go to the ATM, which is just silly. This is like an ATM that was downloaded from, I think, RCAT or something.
mhm.
I'm probably, uh-oh,
You already have it
where
in
did
there.
my ribbon locked up. Here, we'll do that to reset the ribbon. Kind of sketchy. There we go. Right, there we go. Okay, cool. So if we were to place this little ATM, now you kind of have to take my word for it. This family hasn't been edited. It's not any family that we use for anything. But if you were to, because the project parameters exist, you'll see that the moment we loaded this thing in, all of our include and requirements parameters are here.
Mhm,
So if I simply check the box for bang, this thing is FF&E, it now automatically shades itself gray, and it automatically gets the red outlines. But more than that, it's also now automatically scheduled, because the same filters that we use visibility wise, we also use to filter our schedules. So we've automatically got our FF&E or equipment plans generating schedules for us in the same way.
awesome. So before we jump forward, then I
Yeah,
have a
yeah, totally.
I have a question, and I kind of want to try and wrap it up in a bow, sort of
Cool, cool,
the
cool.
initial uh, filtering 101. So to me, and I'm going to kind of go back to how I discovered them and how I sort of visualized it and conceptualized the understanding of it. I mean, the reality is most people in Revit, if not everyone who uses Revit, is extremely familiar with visibility graphics, right, in the model tab,
Totally.
right?
Yep,
And so
absolutely.
so to me, what filtering does is it's very similar, if not the same, except instead of categories and subcategories, you're able to use pretty much any parameter and property in the family to do kind
Absolutely.
of the same thing. You can turn it on, you can turn it off, you can override the colors, you can do all kinds of cool stuff. So for those of you out there who are still trying to sort of follow the path there, I know you've typed VV or VG on your keyboard before, and I know you've gone in there and tried to change the half tone of your furniture or turn off structural
Totally.
framing or stuff. So and that still works, but the control you have here is that you can go not only to types, so you can do like Aaron was saying, you can do specific wall types, but you can also do a specific wall, a parameter within a wall type, and deeper and deeper and deeper, you can do the same things.
Absolutely. And that is a much better and more succinct way to explain it.
Well, listen,
Is
I'm just wrapping up what you said. I mean, you said it all. It's
no,
just...
I'm wordy. It's everyone knows it. So like, here's a great example, right? And one of the things that I love about filters is that it really enables you to do more things by instance than by type. And for me, in the way I like to think about architecture, that's a big deal. And like a great example is like rated walls. So if you take a wall that is a 6-inch metal stud and 3 layers of gyp on each side, most of us who do a lot of architectural work can say, well, that's 3 hours. And then the question is, well, is it 3 hours? It's 3 hours if we want it to be 3 hours, right? You can also put a 6-inch stud and 3 layers of gyp on each side and not put any fire stopping in the wall, not connect it to the deck, not have fire rated doors, at which point it's an unrated wall. So the nice thing is filters enable you to say, this is an MCC6, which is that exact wall, and it's unrated, or it's 1 hour, or it's 2 hour, or it's 3 hour. But since filters are also letting you do this, you can have it do things like, oh my gosh, I want this wall to be 4 hours. Whoops. That's not possible, right? And so again, if we go back to how filters work, all that's happening in here is, and just as you said before, you can go right into visibility graphics, and that's where your filters tab lives. So we're in a view template and we're in visibility graphics, and all we have going on here is there's a filter that says, is this wall set to be 3 hour fire rating? Yes or no? And you'll see here that it's checking the wall category, and it says, this is just kind of a special thing that we do. Is the fire rating assigned equal to 3? And is it equal to 3S, which means 3 hour and smoke. But so what's really cool about that is then there's just another filter right above it that says, did somebody rate a wall to 4 that's not capable of being 4? So is the rating potential less than 4, but then the actual rating assigned is greater than 4? And that means you can start to build in like some QA QC with your filters, which is fantastic.
So actually, that's a perfect segue into a question that Ernesto had, which is somebody was asking about project parameters, but I think you answered that when you were saying that you have the project parameters, but sometimes you're building them into families too, depending on the situation, right? So, but the cool thing there is that it doesn't really make a big difference. They're existing. So I think before I jump into his question, my question was when you're creating the project parameters, are you hitting every category that you possibly can with that, or are you specific with them?
That's a really good question. So for us, it depends on the individual parameters we're putting in. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't say there's a specific answer for any of them. So like,
because I know me when I'm doing it, I usually just say, screw it, I'm just going to kick all the categories for a project parameter, and then they're there.
I can always tell when folks do that. Like, so the parameter called assembly fire rating, if I see that hanging out in the view properties, I'm like, they put it on every category.
Right.
So like the assembly fire ratings are a great example. They're on walls and floors and ceilings and roofs, because those are all, either horizontal or vertical assemblies that can get rated. STC ratings are similar. When it comes to things like the includes, so these things right here are kind of interesting. They have a specific list. So it's not, and this is always an ambiguous description, it's not every category,
but it's a lot.
Every category that I consider part of the actual model. So like your air terminals, casework, ceilings, columns, communication devices. And we have a little joke internally, because I have this list typed out in a code block. Because there's like all kinds of times, like, John, Melissa, and I will be collabing on something like in Dynamo, and it's like, okay, we need to do this process on these categories, and the categories that we want to list is all the stuff in the model. But it's weird because you don't want to run some processes or some data into things like pipe placeholders, right? So there's pipes, but then there's pipe placeholders, and if you run it into pipe placeholders, suddenly things like filters don't work. Or things like visibility overrides don't work.
I was going to say, so you're choosing it based on some of the restrictions of those categories.
Oh, absolutely.
Got
yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So with visibility graphics filters, if you try to add the data into every category, you'll sometimes hit limitations of like the filter itself won't work.
Hmm. Hmm.
And like a good example, and by the way, just to throw Harlan and Sasha at Revit Development, I know they've been super cool about these kind of conversations with us. Like the real interesting ones are like roof fascias.
Hmm.
Like that's like a category, but also not really a category.
Right.
And there are some interesting behaviors with like roof fascias and slab edges where if you try to shove the project parameters in there, that's cool. But then when you try to write the filter, it won't let you.
Hmm.
And I don't remember which one of those two it is, but they've been super cool about explaining it to us and like working with us and, shooting feedback back and forth on like, yeah, that's probably not going to work. And that's why you'll see like roofs, the parent category, totally,
Hmm.
fascias, not so much.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Awesome. So then that,
Good
that leads
question.
me that leads me right into the question that Ernesto had, which was, um, well, he asked if these are all type parameters, but kind of like, I guess my question to expand on that is sort of how are you determining when to use the instance versus the type for
That's a
those?
that's a really good question. And where it gets interesting is my answer even changes amongst categories. So I think when you have to decide between whether something is an instance or a type, it really comes down to what you're doing with the parameter.
Hmm.
And I say that because, as an example, the majority of what I call the includes parameters, so include in appliances, include in restroom accessories, blah blah blah. Those are all types because that is basically we want to declare that an object type is an appliance or an object type is a restroom accessory.
Hmm.
But there are a couple of exceptions to that, like whether or not to include something in site work.
Hmm.
Here's where that gets weird. If you think about what we do with architectural drawings, there are specific drawings that want to show everything outside the building.
Hmm.
But your level one floor plan will probably show the stuff outside the building, but you don't really want to be seeing it full line weight because at that point, your focus is inside the building.
Right.
Now, here's where that gets tough. You don't want to start duplicating wall types because they're used inside and outside the building.
Hmm. Hmm.
So include site is one of the anomalies where if you select a wall here, you'll see that include site is actually an instance parameter.
Hmm.
And we have a few other places that are instance, like show me in the slab edge plan. That's another filter that we have.
Hmm.
And this one is great. Like we have to do slab edge drawings, and you can start a whole massive internal debate about whether architecture or structure should do them. I'm Switzerland. I don't care who does them. I care that they're done right. And
Right.
there's all kinds of complexities there. Staircases that need to interact with the concrete, they should probably be shown on the slab edge plan, but that's not every staircase.
Hmm.
So if we go and model a staircase really quick, it's going to be the dumbest staircase ever because of this little model I have here.
Wow, did you see
You
how
have
many rises there were? What are your floor to floors in this thing?
Well, so so if you remember from the template discussion, like the first floor is like 20, it's
Yeah,
20
yeah,
feet.
yeah. It was
So
looking for
so
like
what
40 treads there.
Yeah, pretty much. So what's really cool though is if we have two staircases, we can tell one of them show me in the slab edge plan and tell the other one not to.
Hmm.
And if I put myself on the spot, which I probably shouldn't do because those are the newest drawings in the template. But if I go in there, I went to the wrong area, didn't I? Let's just go to overall level one. There it is. So you'll see there's now one staircase showing. There's no walls, but
Hmm.
there's one staircase. And if we were to go back to the other drawing, maybe this and this are concrete walls and we need to see them in the slab edge plan.
Hmm.
So the thing is, like, folks generally will try to think up like a whole way to do this, and filters can just be the easy button for a whole bunch of things we have to do documentation wise.
Yes, 100%. Awesome. I'm trying to make sure we're
Yeah,
not
with
we're not
that.
missing any questions here. Misha asked, and I think you answered this, but all of your filters are in all the view templates. Then.
That's a really good question. So a lot of them are in all the view templates. So as an example, this is what we said is basically that's a bet. We're in code compliance. Sorry. If I go to let's just go to a normal floor plan. We have what we call the core list. And the core list is in every view template, but it's not all the filters.
Hmm.
And so, as an example, the core list is basically like 3D clearances for all categories, all of the includes, all of our millwork filters, so base cabinets, full heights, hardware, upper cabinets, all of our rating parameters, finishes, whether you model them as floors or roofs, and wall finishes that you'll see are turned off here because they're on in the finish plans, and then all of our view control filters. So, do you
Hmm.
want to see wall section markers, building section markers, soffit section markers? This is the core list that's in every view, including a very special what we call the system hack. And this is just a filter that basically says it's got all of the MEP
Yeah.
categories selected, and it says check that the system name is greater than blank. And if any of you link in
Nice.
an MEP model and like the ducts are pink and the
Mm,
pipes are blue, this filter is all you need. A
yeah.
single filter. You never have to say anything to your MEP engineer. You don't need to nag them about object styles or filters or whatever. You put in this one filter, all their stuff turns black. It's awesome. Or gray,
Or
whatever
whatever
color you
color
want
you
to do
want. Yeah,
it.
that's fantastic.
uh,
That's a great use right there. I didn't even
it's
think about
it's a
that.
great filter. So I love this question. So all of these are in basically every view template. If we hit the add button, then these are also all filters that are still in the template that are not in every view template.
Hmm.
And that's just because they're not you like so the majority that are in the main list are used all the time.
Right.
But like the horizontal fire ratings are only really needed for sections and elevations. So there's no
Hmm.
point having them in plans. The air terminals are only needed in RCP. And then you get into like the really specialty ones. Like we have some QA QC views for like what are the STCs that we want on the walls? What are the
Hmm.
wall heights? We really only need those filters in the quality control views. So
Hmm.
simply to keep the list from scrolling indefinitely, we leave those out. Um,
Before you jump out,
oh, sorry.
no, it's okay. I mean, you could probably do it in here too. So your section, maybe show some folks how you hide specific sections. So you're saying
Yeah.
building wall sections. I think that'll be a really cool tip for people to
Yeah,
see.
absolutely. So like let's just say, right? So our template's broken up into like let's say a building is this big. And by the way, like it doesn't look like it on the sheet. That is a massive building. Our template is set up to be 9 sheets, which is 9 30 by 42 sheets in plan.
Nice.
And then like 12 stories tall. So when we make the building that big, it's astronomically huge.
Hmm.
But every firm gets to decide how they want to show section markers a little different, right? So I'm
Hmm.
gonna draw them in this special view that's called find things here. And the whole purpose of this view is you see everything all the time, and everything is whacked out colors. And we'll get to why in a second. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a section that's called a building section, and we'll rip a couple of those across here like so. And you now that you can see the section markers, you can probably see exactly how big we made this building.
Yeah, I know. I was just gonna say this is ginormous.
That's a big building. Now we're going to make a wall section marker. We'll make a couple of those as well. And so you'll notice I just type in wall section and then our sections pop up, and we'll put a few wall sections around the building as well. And I'll even copy that because I like my copy command. And we'll put a few down here. And I'm sure a lot of you are cringing right now because if you're like me, those sections are now going the wrong way. So I'm going to have to do one of these, and I'm going to have to, my OCD, I'm sorry. I've got to flip them all. And okay. So firms' opinions vary on how this works. I was taught that your building section markers show up on your overall plans, your wall section markers show up on your 1/8-inch plans, and then like your ceiling section markers only show up on your RCPs and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
That gets to be tough because in Revit, they show up based on where they intersect with the view. And of course, your ceiling section will have to be dropped low enough to show all the details. So
Hmm.
what's nice about filters is if we go back and look at our overall floor plan, that didn't go my way. Oh, okay, hold on. I made a silly, silly, silly mistake. So this view, nobody ever actually works in this view. So it's at a higher scale because it wasn't
There we
anticipating
go.
anybody doing that. So that was a little dumb. Okay. This view is normally where you go when you can't find something, but I went off script. So when you're in your overall floor plan, you'll see that you only see building sections and you don't see any of the wall sections. And then if we were to go look at floor plan in any of the partial plans like area 2, that's where you'll see the wall sections, but you won't see the building sections.
Hmm.
And if we go look at how that's done in our partial plan view template under filters, down at the bottom, we have all of our filters that are called view controls. So here we have wall sections visible, and then we have building sections not visible. And this is like, these are the most basic filters, which is always why I'm kind of embarrassed to talk about this stuff because like filters are like a super like simple but amazingly elegant thing.
Hmm.
So like here you'll see that the filter called building sections is just looking for a section where the family and type name contains the word section and contains the name or
Hmm.
contains the word building. And my personal proclivity is I always do it as like two filters like that, just
Hmm.
because I don't really have a good reason why.
That's okay. It works, right? Visually, it works.
Um,
So
I'm
I
gonna
mean,
I'm gonna
go ahead.
I'll tell you something interesting. I also Melissa pointed this out to me. I don't know what year it happened, but it's no longer case sensitive.
Really?
So yeah, so
That's
you'll notice here that
fascinating.
I this is all capitals,
Yeah.
and the section types are not capitals. They're title case in our template.
Something in
Um,
Revit like that is not case sensitive. That's
that it
fascinating.
but it's a change, and I
Hmm.
know it's a change because I don't remember whose class it was, and I'm doing the woman a disservice by not remembering whose class it was. But there was a great tip back in the day on when you're writing filters, doing things like this, where you deliberately leave off the first letter
Mm,
because you would always run into like, did somebody capitalize building or did they leave it
I see.
lowercase? And
Yeah.
if you simply left off all the first letters, you didn't have to worry about it anymore.
Yes.
Um, but when they made the filter change to this whole or possibility, they somehow also slipped in that it's no longer case sensitive,
Yeah, and I
which
did notice actually. I was doing something the other day, and I noticed that the contains was a lot more flexible than it used to be. So that's probably what you're
it's
talking
it's
about.
it's
The how it's
fantastic.
searching.
So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so another kudos to the Revit team because we knew you slipped in the or thing. I didn't know about the case insensitivity, which is great. Uh,
So one of the reasons I brought that up is I think that the sections, it's a simple, like you said, it's a simple example, but at the same time I think that can be so relatable to people because when you're using the model or the annotation
mhm.
tab, right, you're like, oh, I can
Yeah,
turn off sections, oh, I can turn off elevations. Meanwhile, you go into an elevation or a section view and you want to hide, your wall sections or something like that, and then
totally.
immediately people are just click 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 hide in view, click 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 hide in view, right? Because that is how they believe and know how to do it. But the reality
Right.
is
And
you can use these filters and the nice, it works, yes, hide and view works, but the downfall is you draw four more sections. Guess what? You got to go back and hide those new sections, right? So by doing it this way, it's using the parameter information to hide that specific section. So you can draw thousands of them and they will never show up in that view.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm also so glad that you brought it up though, because the glitch that caught me when I was drawing, we should talk about for a second, because
Sure.
the functionality that was in play here was functionality that was called hide at scales coarser than. And
Mm-hmm.
to give the original Revit developers credit, like they didn't have filters back then.
Yeah.
So that was the mechanism they were planning. And their logic was sort of like if you drew a wall section at an 1/8 inch, you probably wouldn't want to see it
Mm-hmm.
on a 16th inch plan. So that was always the intent of this, is when you create a section, it inherits the scale of the view you're currently drawing in. So
Yep.
so because I drew them at 1/8 inch, then I went looking at a 16th inch plan for them and they didn't show up. But here's what's great about filters is, again, like the OG Revit developers put in all these neat little features that were meant to deal with these things. But as project complexity grew, hide at scales coarser then comes up like way short, like in a number of ways. So now hide at scales coarser than is functionality that I tell project teams unilaterally just ignore it, because it's great functionality, but
Mm-hmm.
filters can do everything hide at scales coarser than can do.
Yes.
And what that means is, this sounds like a dumb thing, but 30 seconds ago we had two ways to hide section markers and we completely eliminated one of the ways.
Mm-hmm.
So we've cut our troubleshooting in half,
Mm-hmm.
with the exception of when Aaron's an idiot and he opens the coordination view and he draws section markers like a jerk. But if you don't do that,
Yeah, no,
then
but
you
that hide scale, hide at scales courser then is I like you said, I understand why it's there, but man, does it cause
totally.
so many issues for people learning Revit and like you said,
And
troubleshooting.
so and here's where things get interesting, right? So like when we sell or when we provide templates to customers, we basically tell them don't ever touch this thing. But I
Mm,
also I also understand that Revit development can't really take it out yet because not everybody has filters built in.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we're in like this weird in between phase where, like, if all these filters came built in to all of the templates that get provided with Revit out of the box, maybe hide at scales coarser then could go die on a hill somewhere.
So one of the things though that brings up a
Along with
good
VG work sets. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, right. um I wonder. So if you're using your template, for example, and
Hmm.
like similar to what you just did, you're banging through a set of drawings and you're placing all of these sections, building sections, wall sections. you have to be cognizant now of the view you're in, or are you just drawing them all and then selecting them all and saying 1 inch equals 400 and calling it a day? Like, are you,
So
is there a default that you're drawing them in, or?
that's a great question. So the only reason that glitch came up is because that view that I was in is literally called Find Things Here.
Mm-hmm.
And we put this view in the template in case people get frustrated, because the downside of having all the filters that we have, right, is check this out. I'm in sheet A211. It's a partial plan, which means it's at 1/8 inch. And I'm going to go rock up and make some wall sections. But, I forget that the template has all these section types. So it's on building
Mm-hmm.
section. And I go to draw it and I get that whole dreaded, like,
Oh yeah.
hi, congrats. So one of my favorite things to explain to users is what this thing means, because it says none of the created elements, but you kind of have to read that a couple of times. Like, so I like to actually tell users this thing says, congratulations, you did successfully make something, but
Right.
it's hidden. And
Yes.
that's kind of a funny thing. So what we created a while back is Find Things Here is where we tell users to go when they're frustrated because one of our filters tripped them.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you go here just to find the thing that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And generally then you can take a look at it and see why is it showing up here and not in the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we tell everybody just to work right in whatever documentation view they're in.
Yeah.
As far as the hide at scales coarser, then sometimes, like if it's necessary, I'll come into this view and just with reckless abandon grab like every section in the project and set it to the highest setting it can go to. Where are my section views? Okay, well, yeah, pretend I did that, because I don't know why that didn't just work, but we'll just set this on 1 inch equals 400 and call it a day.
No, that's awesome. That's and actually even just the little tip of the section views inherit the scale that you're drawing them in, or the hide at scales coarser than and inherits the scale of the view you're drawing them in, is something that I think immediately should be valuable to some people. I think because
Totally. You do bring up a point. I wish we could like default that to 1 inch equals 400 all the time. That would just be awesome, because it would save a lot of heartache.
Right. Exactly.
So and then I think like another one of my favorites is filters give us some really neat. It's like, so we do some graphical things that used to not really be possible with without filters. And what I mean by that is, like, the majority of companies that have millwork libraries, the cabinets are all symbolic lines. In plan anyway. So like they're modeled, but then they're all symbolic lines, and that's all good. My issue with that, like the symbolic lines, has always been a tough sell for me, because they're like one trick ponies. They only show up one way, and they show up even when they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
So it was I don't want to say early, but it was like 2009 when I realized I was totally done with symbolic lines. Like, I didn't want anything to do with them anymore. And I know exactly what it was. This is like a funny story, but I worked on an optometry office, and I hope the irony is not lost on you here, but I was working at an eye doctor's office where no wall was straight and no wall was vertical. And I'm like, a whole bunch of people who are showing up at a doctor's office because they can't see, this is probably not a safe environment for them to walk around. So anyway, and I had to make a bunch of cabinets, and of course, you couldn't see, or you could see them in all the plans even when you didn't want to, and it was frustrating. So here's what I love about filters is now all of our millwork has no symbolic line work in plan. So you either see the geometry or you don't. But if we go back to our normal view setup here, we've got a filter in play that basically says countertops, whether you've modeled them using generic model families or floors, are 60% transparent.
Nice.
Underneath that, there are base cabinets that are showing as dashed lines. Now, on the surface, this looks more complicated because now you have to have these filters set up, and that's annoying. But you know what I love about it is it means at 16th inch, we don't have to show the stupid cabinets anymore, because they're not peeking through with symbolic lines. They're still there. They're visible in the view, but the countertop is simply not transparent because the filter is not turned on.
Nice.
So this means like architects get to decide what they want their drawings to look like. Presentation plans, don't show the cabinets. That's cool.
No, that's great. I mean, I spend half the time when I download families deleting symbolic lines from them, because I'm just like you. I cannot handle it. I think what you see is what you should get, and let's make it work. Let's make it work.
But I also totally have to respect just the man hours. Like, have you downloaded like the decor range?
Yes.
Where every burner is a nested family with symbolic lines that's nested in a range top that's nested. I'm like, holy cow.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
and we've all spent all that time undoing it after they've spent the time doing it. So they owe us all like couple $100, whatever.
We have an
But
interesting
so,
question, I think,
mhm.
before we jump onto another topic that I think I'm going to try and reword it a little bit, but Miran and Misha both kind of asked questions I think can be along the same lines, and it's kind of if you're implementing this uh, on a template, right? It makes sense to me where you're working in the beginning to make all this. But let's say you want to implement these things on an existing project maybe or an existing template. Adding views or adding filters to a view template or a view in general, right, is a manual process. So is there how are you going about implementing, let's say, 40, 60, 70, view filters into view templates, which are then applied to views? Like, are you using Dynamo
Yes.
for that, or is there a trick that no one knows about to say, like, filter all views or something like that?
I am actually so glad. So thank you for this question because I would not have thought to brought this up in this call. So,
All right.
uh, so two things there. So first of all, because when you read the first half of the question, I was misinterpreting what they were asking. So how I decide what filters to make is I actually tell everybody start flipping pages in a paper set of drawings, and
Right.
every time you see a schedule or something in a drawing that is highlighted or dashed because it's special, write a list.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have a list, you've got a list of where to start for filters.
Mm-hmm.
Now I used to do them all manually. And like, so when I built the first version of the Parallax template in 2016 or 2015, when we started the company, the majority of these filters that have been put in these view templates was just soul sucking days of adding filters. And the only reason I know this is because I stumbled across this add-on after I got
Of
done.
course, right. That's how
Uh,
it always
so
works.
so there is an add-on, and I will butcher the author's name. They are amazing. They've responded to me on Twitter. They've traded emails with me at all hours of the night because of the time zone difference. And you have to understand that because of the complexity of what filters do, the dialog box is super intimidating. That's going to pop up in a second here. But this is
Whoa.
the coolest. Yeah. But I need to, and I'm super glad you brought this up. I hope it doesn't derail
No,
today.
not at
I,
all.
I need to explain to you what this thing does because the power is immense. And just to clarify, we're huge Dynamo fans. Um, Obviously John Pearson taught me Dynamo. That's how we started working together. And John and Melissa and I all use Dynamo for a ton of stuff. But I'm also a firm believer of trying to build a workflow in an app like Dynamo when somebody else has already fully built the workflow.
Right. Yep.
Like this app, I think the cost on this app is like $80.
Yep.
Which is, I mean, as an app, for an app, paying like $80 to $100 is not cheap. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's like less than a billable hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I can
Right.
tell you the amount of time I would spend building this in Dynamo. So let's walk through what it does really quick. I'm going to hit check none. So on the left side, you pick what do you want to start with as your source. And so I'm just going to say, let's go with like view templates for floor plans.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's basically going to put all of those right up here. So
Nice.
now I'm going to say, here is my code. Actually, let's do one where like there aren't filters. Yeah, let's go to like code compliance plan. So you're going to see now right down here, these are all of the filters that are in that view template. And you can choose between, do you want to see them in alphabetical order or see them how they are in the view? And this is important for those of you watching who don't know or haven't used filters extensively. When you're looking at them in my template, they appear as if they're in alphabetical order, but that's just because of my own OCD. The filter dialog box is not alphabetical, it's
Nope.
hierarchical. So the higher up on the list the filter is, the more precedent it gets.
Mm-hmm.
So the view filter manager lets you sort them basically either alphabetical or by the order they're in the view or the view template itself. So what's really cool here is now, so as an example, like we don't have the fire rating filters in every view. We just have them in code compliance because that's kind of our standard. But let's say you wanted to put the fire tape ratings in all of your floor plans. So you can basically check all these. And then when you're done, you can say, let's see, where is it? Do you want to copy the filters or the overrides or both? So what's really cool about that is if you copy in just the filters, it will put the filters in your new view, but it won't do the overrides. But because we want the fire tapes, we want to say copy the overrides as well. Now, you also obviously want to check over here, like right now, here are the different overrides you're telling it to take. And so an important note is for some reason the visibility is defaulted to off. So like if you want to grab include appliances and turn off appliances in a bunch of views, you have to make sure you check that. But so this one in the middle you can totally ignore, because this is just, you can like manually build filters on the fly while you're in here. But I'm like not smart enough to use it, so I just I just don't do it. This right here, this little tiny checkbox is the most powerful thing in this app. And placing these filters that you've checked in your destination views, how do you want them to become ordered? And you get options like place them at the end, or start at a specific line in the filter dialog, or the really powerful one, I want you to keep the position of a common filter.
Wow.
Now, here's what that means. Let's say I was going to copy fire ratings into a whole ton of views that don't have fire ratings. Well, there is no common filter because the fire ratings aren't in there. But if I say also take that filter, which is in every other view template I have, it's now going to always guarantee that the fire ratings are right below that filter, because that is now the common filter. And this is when I was doing this in a template. So like, I'll tell you the quick story. Include sites was the last include that we put in. And I was like, oh my God, if I add that filter, I'm going to have to sit there and click the up button like 50 times per view. And so I emailed the developer and I'm like, look, I see the option. I know how it works, but it's not working. So what do I do? And I showed him a screenshot and he goes, just take include site and include restroom accessories. And I said, yeah, but restroom accessories is already in all my views. And he goes, I know. That's what's going to make it go right in that order. And I was like, so awesome. Basically, yeah. So then this over here is just your destination views. So if I say view templates, like, so these are all my plan view templates. So if I like, and we're not going to hit run, don't worry.
Yeah. I was just going to say, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure?
So like if you were to do this and you were to hit copy, which is the run button, it will then start going and it will put the filters in all the view templates and the overrides and put them in order. And it just pops up this really cute little okay when it's done.
Wow. That's awesome.
And it works like a freaking champion. Best $80 I've spent in years.
That's a great example of. I mean, one of the first things I do too when people ask me, if, "Hey, can you do this in Dynamo?" is there an add-in for it? Because I mean, why? You know, to your point, if
sure.
First research the add-ins that exist and see, try them out, because there's, I mean, yeah, Dynamo's great. I'm obviously a giant fan myself, but if there's a stable working add-in, then use it, right? I mean, why not?
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, totally. And I think it also depends on like your prowess in Dynamo. And I'm okay at Dynamo. Like I can move data around, like that's whatever. But once you get into like view and visibility graphics controls, for me, Dynamo gets super scary because like you need all these nodes to like control the filter, but then put the filter in the view and then the view dialog itself. And then, even just like you've got to filter for me, you have to filter the views down to view templates and only apply it to the view templates, because to try to apply it to any of the views, it's going to error out because there's view templates. And so I'm like, I love Dynamo. I am not good enough at it for this.
So definitely share that link with me, and I'll put it in the description of the video to that app, and then I'll also do it in the blog post tomorrow.
Totally.
People can check it out themselves.
And yes, that is the name I cannot pronounce, but they are amazing.
That's a really cool looking name, Architecton Zix. That's pretty neat.
Yeah. Huge fan of the app. Highly recommend.
Sweet. So before we start wrapping up, there's a very specific question that I think I'd love to hear if you've run into this. Charbel, I think. Sorry if I butchered your name, dude. So Charbel asked, he's had troubles trying to apply filters to walls that are being used as curtain panels. So if you're using like a wall, I'm assuming he's talking about if you use like a stud wall that has multiple layers as a curtain panel. Have you run into that at all? And if you haven't, it's fine. I just I thought I'd bring it up because I think it'd be interesting.
So I haven't per se, but that's also because as a general rule, I don't ever put walls in curtain walls.
I was just gonna say I don't think I've ever really done that unless it was a major workaround to get something done, right?
Well, so I know a lot of folks that do. A lot of folks will use the curtain wall tool when they want to basically just break up, whether it's precast concrete or whether it's something else. They'll do it just to get walls that are broken up, like this. What I can tell you though is based on the wording of the question. So this is one of the reasons I don't like it, by the way, is based on the wording of the question, the author said, I've included curtain panels
Mm-hmm.
in the filter. I believe, and in this situation, it's tough because I don't believe this will respond to curtain panels at all. I think it's still
Mm.
responding to walls.
Mm-hmm.
I may be wrong, but I'm so intrigued by this question that even if we're
We're
a
gonna
minute
try it
late, I
out.
have to do
Oh
it
yeah,
real
let's do it,
quick
man. Let's.
because so this is an
I'm
MA.
intrigued myself, so I
So
want to see where this goes.
it's an MAA6 wall, so we already know that. So if we go through the process of basically making a filter real quick, we're going to say we want a new filter. It's going to be walls MAA6 only. Just because really I can't type a 6. So we'll hit OK. We'll go down to our wall category and we'll say wall where the item type tag, which is the parameter we use instead of type mark, equals MAA6. Now, whenever I make a filter, my personal preference is I always put the filter in the view, but before I mess with visibility at all, I also just color it green.
Hmm.
And the green is a dumb thing, but I always do this because people love to make filters and
Mm-hmm.
then they like to hide stuff and
Mm-hmm.
they don't really know everything that they touched.
Right. Right.
So like if your filter accidentally, so just the other day we realized that our plan detail filter was also getting section details.
Hmm.
And I had missed that. So we just fixed it. So I'm going to turn all the lines green. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to put, and I see exactly what he's talking about, that they
Yeah.
don't work.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to do MAA6 as a standalone as well. There we go. So yeah, that's interesting. I had not run into that before.
So it's a curtain panel now,
And
which
yeah,
is
I
unique.
see the
Yeah.
point as well that it is now showing up as a curtain panel. So now my curiosity is, and again, it sounds like we know this doesn't work based on the author. So let's say I'm going to say make this an or, and I'm going to add in curtain panels as well and say add a rule. So this is going to be walls, and I'm going to say this is curtain panels. And I'm really curious if this will work. Um, the reason I'm curious, okay,
Hmm.
now I'll bet you I know what's going on here though. Is so for the person who asked the question, I think what you're going to want to look into is there are certain fields that may exist for walls that because this one is getting turned into a curtain panel,
Mm-hmm.
they may not exist properly, right? So you'll see here, and I don't have a good explanation for why it would work for me in this situation, but basically item type tag is a shared parameter.
Between both a
Um,
curtain panel and a wall.
between both categories. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm not sure why it's working for me. I misspoke earlier though. I thought the answer was going to be that it had to be filtering walls, not curtain panels. So I was
Yeah.
totally wrong there. I learned something new, which is
So,
a lot of fun.
so it's the category is doing something with the available properties probably or
Yeah,
something there.
totally.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
but whoever had the question, if you want to reach out via email, like after we get offline, I'd love to look at it more and see if we can help you come up with a solution because that's a really interesting. Because even though I don't do this, I know a lot of people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, that's unique. So one last question. I
yeah,
think
totally.
everyone's into it, so why not? So Ernesto, I believe, asked again. Um, is there a way to use filters to modify? It looks like he's saying different layers of the wall. And so my initial thought is we're talking parts, but I think he's saying if you have a layers within the wall, all right, can you utilize filters somehow to do that? So maybe I don't know materials. I'm not sure. I'm not sure 100% what
So
his question is, but I think what he's saying is trying to change the graphics based on the layer of the wall or something like that.
yeah, and so Jeff, I think you hit the nail on the head. So there are two ways to do it, right? So one is converting everything to parts,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're going to do that, then I definitely recommend using Dynamo,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously, so parts are a tough sell for me.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, because parts are complicated because once you convert an object to parts, then it's no longer its original category, and that
Mm-hmm.
makes scheduling very difficult because you can tell a view to show the original or show parts, but you can't tell a schedule to show unparted only.
Mm-hmm.
So as an example, let's say you have 5 walls, and because you need to in a model, you part 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now you know you need a part schedule to show these 2 walls,
Right.
but you don't have any way to only schedule 3 in the other schedule. So
Mm-hmm.
what you end up having to do is introduce your own project parameter and then manually make sure that parameter matches up the parting. And now you get into, and this is okay, this is where Dynamo comes in. So
Mm-hmm.
we use a graph to auto part everything and automatically put the parameters in.
Yeah.
If you do that, you can filter by layers, but then you also have to remember that none of that stuff is walls anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
things like line weights are going to be shredded. Your wall tags are all going to disappear. Like it sucks.
Yep.
The other way is that when a lot of us are modeling walls now, we actually model the backups separately from the finishes.
Hmm.
We do this all the time on exteriors. This is on a brick building. This is how we would model it: is there would be stud backups, and then bricks would be separate.
Hmm.
And sometimes we'll even do it with like interior finishes, or sometimes the exterior finish will be like 2 or 3 layers. And then we just use a really basic naming convention. So our exterior finishes are always FINEXT.
Hmm.
And so if we were to go back into our filters, we would see that there are wall finish exteriors and wall finish interiors, and we filter them that way. But most of the time when people ask this question, it's like they want to filter off substrates and only keep
Yeah.
stud turned on. And I totally do not recommend doing that as separate walls. Like, you don't want to get into modeling individual layers of GIF as
No.
walls. You'll
No.
go
Yeah.
crazy.
No, but that's a
Uh,
good tip there, and that seems to be where most people end up is especially when it comes to what you're just showing there with you have a brick veneer, especially if it's a not a full height brick veneer and stuff. It always ends up being easier to keep the veneer separate as far as the
Yeah,
wall is concerned.
totally. I will tell you though, just on that note, because Jeff, because you brought up parts, like if any of you are collabing or working on a project where the GC
Oh man,
is
yeah, I
using your
was.
model in Navisworks, totally part everything when you like. I don't know about you, Jeff. I love parting my models
Yeah.
before I send them to Navisworks because then they can actually see the layers. And
Yes.
um,
I was just gonna
so
say they're like parts that have been like a blessing, but also a curse because they do have on the Navisworks side and graphically, right? There's a
mhm.
major advantage, but to your point, data wise, when you're bringing models forward into different programs, parts can be a disaster.
Yeah, totally. So Jeff, you'd like this, and we'll have to save this for another call, but I'll show you really briefly. So when we export to Navisworks, we still export view by view. We don't
Hmm.
do the whole model thing. So
Hmm.
we export view by view, and walls actually get exported twice. That
Hmm.
way, the GC can see all the model data, but then they have a part export
Yeah, there
for
we
when they
go.
want to do clashing. But here's the part you love. So I'm drawing a really crummy axon here by pen. Um, and the
It's
reason
like
I'm drawing
Pictionary. I'm trying to figure out what it is.
yeah, no, pretend that's straight. So here's just a 4 7/8 wall, like in axon,
Hmm.
except the stud layer, that's the top of it right there, right?
Hmm.
So we've basically what we do is we have a dynamo graph that automatically parts the wall, and then it takes the layer that is the studs
Hmm.
and it deletes everything above 6 inches. So for the Navisworks users, this is amazing because they can search set and hide everything but the stud layer and be looking at just a 6 inch nub that runs the full length of all of the walls. So what's super great about that is when they're doing coordination and they're looking for where plumbing interacts with the stud tracks in the walls,
Hmm.
the plumbing isn't hidden by the wall. There's a little stub where the wall it goes, and if the pipe is completely dying into the stub, they're okay. But if the pipe is like sticking out a little bit, then they know that there's a coordination issue, but they can still see all the way across the building because this whole portion of wall isn't there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a dynamo graph that auto parts, finds all the
Yep.
parts that say stud layer,
Hmm.
creates the division at +6 inches off the levels, and then changes the exclude this part parameter value. And kudos to John because he discovered that basically that's not a parameter that you can like you can't delete it in
Hmm.
Dynamo,
Hmm.
but you can just set the is excluded parameter to 1
Mm.
and they go away.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
So
That's
sorry, that was
great.
parts, which has nothing to do with filters.
No, hey, I'm sure there's some. I mean, but it had to do with the question, so that's okay. All right. Wow, it's 8:37 already. I was trying.
Oh
There's thing.
man,
I
sorry.
know. No, it's not your fault. This is great. I mean, people are loving it. I'm loving it. I just want to make sure that we don't leave anyone hanging too hard while we've got you here. So Robert just asked. I think following up on the double wall idea that you're showing here.
Mhm.
Doesn't that create weirdness with penetration? So I'm assuming he's talking about windows, doors, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so it can, right? So when you do the join geometry, so when I modeled it that way, I was talking while I did it, so you may not have noticed. But when you model it that way and you see the thick line work going through it, you do have to use modify join geo on them. And what that will do is that'll make families automatically rip an opening through both. Now, you're totally correct that this frame is now not correct, but this comes down to really having custom libraries that allow you to create that detail how you want it to be created. So
Mm-hmm.
like in this case, we have doors and windows that allow us to manually set frame depths and move the door's position or the window's position in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's imperative for every firm to have because even the way Revit does it out of the box, where it fully wraps the entire architectural wall, that's not always the condition that we want.
Right.
So that's an awesome question, and you are totally correct. You have to have custom content that will let you deal with that situation, or you'll run into that.
100%. Awesome. All right. I think that's
awesome question.
I think that's a great place to stop.
Totally.
If
And
wanna,
just so you all know, feel free to like send more questions to Jeff, and he'll send them on. And,
oh yeah, definitely. This doesn't end here. I'm sure you'll be back too, Aaron. So don't worry about it. If you want to stop sharing your screen so everyone can see your face again, so in case they forgot what you looked like while we wrap up here.
Oh man, I know. I probably aged a few minutes in the last hour.
I know, right? No, that's because you have 2 kids now. Oh man, well, thank you so much, Aaron. This is great. Thank you all for joining us. This was fantastic. I hope you gleaned some information from it. Filters are just one of those things where I think if you haven't dove into them, take what you saw Aaron doing here and dive into them, try them out. I mean, one of the things that beyond just templates, one of the things that I use filters for all the time, which is just kind of lost on folks, is there's a couple of things. First is being able to hide stuff through linked models. Filters are great for that, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
And then the other thing is just being able to condition models, like Aaron was saying. He turns things green. Being able to go in and say, hey, in this 3D view, I want to see every wall type 1A as red. And it's just so helpful to be able to go through and just set. And you may not, it has nothing to do with the template, but it's just helping you understand how that model's built and going through it. So if you haven't dove into them, I highly suggest it. If you find yourself right clicking and hide element 1,000 times in a view, you could probably use a filter for that. So that's a little tip there. But
totally.
So again, parallaxteam.com, I believe, right?
Yep. Parallax Team, one R, 2 L's. Make sure I say that correctly.
I will
one R, 2 L.
And I will put all the links. I'll put the link to Aaron on Twitter. I'll put the link to Parallax Team, as well as the apps and anything we mentioned here.
Yes.
And any final words before we wrap up here?
Oh man, if you're already using filters, awesome, keep at it. If you're not using filters every day right now, jump in and just start building some filters, because they will totally change the way you do everything in Revit. They're like the biggest thing for me in the last 15 years. So
awesome, man. Thank you so much for joining me again. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm going to go put my little one to bed and catch you all on Twitter.
You got it. And everyone else, thanks for joining us tonight. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. Check me out at therevitKid.com or at therevitKid on Twitter. And reach out with any questions, and I'll see you this time next week. So good night, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Good night.